Okay, you're good.
All right. Thank you all very much for your patience while we get everything set up. We are here to discuss the concept of whether or not baskets on the top tier of disc golf should be smaller. Today on our panel, we have Jessica Weiss, Jeremy Colling, Sarah Holcomb, Paul Ulibarri, Eric Oakley, and Joel Freeman. We're going to start with, we have two people who are in general against the idea, two people who are mostly undecided, and two people who are for the idea. And we're going to start with the undecideds, and they're going to give us a couple of thoughts. Then we'll go to the yeses, and then we'll go to the nos, and then we'll have a conversation. And so with that, let's start with the person on the left of each group and have you guys start, and I'll hand it off to Paul Ulibarri.
Thank you, Steve. So my whole thing is over the last, like, however many years, like, we've been trying to make the basket kind of as big as possible that catches everything, right? And I feel like over the last couple of years, you know, with the mock X's and things like that, like, the baskets are catching better than ever. So now by shrinking the basket, my only thing, the reason I'm indifferent about it is, are we going to make a basket that doesn't catch as well? I don't like that, because obviously in a sport, spit outs are completely like a negative thing, especially in the public eye. Is that going to be a positive? You know, and obviously, like, people are getting good, and the level's going to keep increasing, and people are going to get better at longer putts and things like that. But it's like, is it good? And for me, I do accept it if it catches almost better than the ones do now, which to me is how we're going to make that.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Sarah?
And I'm also mostly undecided about this because I haven't really found any compelling evidence either way. So for it, you know, we see that for the smaller baskets, we see that, you know, the men are like hitting every putt inside the circle. Spectators walk away and don't even watch people putt because it's boring. You know, I mean, we're getting 18 downs out on the world right now. You know, so all of that I can see, you know, and also when it comes to the comparison of ball golf, you know, the putting is totally different. You know, ball golf has a +2 on the green, whereas with disc golf it's primarily just a +1. You know, you're only getting, you know, it's not two strokes on the green, it's just one. But against it at the same time, I can see that, you know, we have the catching issue. We have, I mean, I don't think putting is really hard. It's too hard. I'm sorry, excuse me. I don't think putting is too hard. It's definitely hard still. Like even the way it is. And also, like, I mean, in other sports like free throw shooting, free throw percentages, and, you know, tennis serving and other controllable sports, we see these people cultivating this skill, and, you know, their NBA players are shooting, you know, 100% from the free throw line. We find that to be boring. You know, so, like, you know, a normal person might be able to make free throws, but can you make them at 100%? You know, so I feel like with the top men, they're high scoring inside the circle, maybe akin to free throw shooting. But at the same time, there's also, you know, there's the when it comes to other sports, we also see that in, you know, in NBA, the free throw line is further away. In NFL, the ball is bigger. In Major League Baseball, they don't let you use metal bats. You know, so there are equipment changes at the pro level that could be appropriate if executed right. So basically, to me, the onus is on whether we want do we want to follow ball golf's model of scoring or not. And then also, is the spectator and basically the audience, is that a priority over the game? Those are my two thoughts.
So just to clarify, when you said follow the ball golf model of scoring,
Right.
Can you clarify what that meant?
So what I mean by that is, do we want scoring to be similar in disc golf as it is to ball golf, our kind of cousin sport? And if it is, then we're not achieving that right now when somebody can shoot an 18 down on our courses. And is it putting that is that thing? Is that why? Because we have only a +1 on the green versus maybe a +2 in putting or in ball golf?
So when you say that, you're talking about the actual end score, not how you get there.
Yeah, just
Okay.
like the scoring model, I guess.
Very good. So thank you both. With that, we will go over to the yes side, which is Joel Freeman and Eric Oakley. And Joel, you're sitting on the left, so you go first.
Cool. Yeah. So my main thing when I think of this topic is I just think of the number of like bad putts that I throw that still end up in the bucket. And I think probably for anybody here or anybody in on this conversation who has played disc golf for a living or has ever treated it, at the very least, those people who have treated it as their job have had that experience where things are tight, your battle is, it's this tight, intense battle, and the guy, the other guy tosses a putt, it's not that good, it just kind of squeaks in, it's a little deflating, you know what I mean? So I feel like I see that a lot from myself and other players. It just seems a little off to me that you don't necessarily earn your putt. And obviously the argument could be, well, you put it in the right direction, right general area, so you did earn it in a sense. But it just doesn't feel, in the same way that I execute a sweet gap off the tee or something, every once in a while I don't feel like I executed the putt and then it still goes in anyway. So that's my main thing. And then beyond that, I think looking at other sports in a handful of general ways, it just generally seems a little bit too easy to score. You see those high numbers under par. And why compare it to other sports? Because they have a lot of interest, a lot of money, a lot of things that I consider at least to be a positive thing to disc golf. If it got more attention, more money involved, and et cetera. So those are my main two thoughts.
Thank you, Joel. Eric?
So, having talked to Paul recently, we talked about designing courses to be more difficult, where we're challenging players off the tee a lot more. And that's a different discussion, but it kind of hones in on this because right now we're not challenging ourselves as players on the green as much as we should be, and even on the approach. We can be left with 100 feet, and we're not thinking, all right, I need to put this inside of 10 feet. We're trying to, but in most cases, we're like, I'm going to put it as close as I possibly can. And sometimes that's a 35-footer, sometimes that's a 50-footer. But we have the opportunity to score, to save par, birdie, or better from that distance without having to challenge ourselves to put it close. And that's where our sport should be moving in the right direction, because the player that is executing their shots from the tee, whether that puts them inside circle one or inside of that putting range, then we're in good shape. But also on the approaches, especially on the more difficult courses we play, we're having to play more par fours, par fives, where we're not going to be in the same spot every single round. And that challenge should now be tested of how close can you put it to make sure that you get yourself up and down with a smaller target that allows for more separation. Players that are executing those shots and putting themselves in opportunities to score will score, or should score if they are feeling it, and which will hopefully separate the field, because the player that puts it to 15 and the player that puts it to 40, now with a smaller target, you're likely to have a scoring separation. You're challenging players across all facets of the game, which is good. Now, as specifications go, I know that we don't have something like that. I know that Paul mentioned the catching issue. I would love to work together as a community if we were to go towards a small target to find out what that actually looks like. Not have companies or somebody else, we as a collective work to say, all right, we want it to be a little bit shorter, a little bit this way, make the tray a little bit bigger. So when we do catch or hit chains or stuff like that with enough velocity, we're not getting those push outs, those weird fall outs, if you will, from the basket. So when you do what you're supposed to do as a player, you're rewarded with a successful putt.
Just to clarify two things. You said if you're at 100 feet, is basically what you're saying at 100 feet, it's a gimme up and down and very little chance of it.
For the top professionals, probably put it at, they're going to get up and down about 90 to 95% of the time.
If not more.
If not more.
And then the last point you were making, were you saying you were just making an additional point of standardization is important?
Standardization is very important because and it would, if we were to make a standard basket that is smaller, we would need to, everything would need to stay in the same specifications that would be tested and tried, that we know that they're going to catch at a high percentage, that we can all agree on if this is a direction to go that allows for, all the players to be in agreement. That's a good basket. If you put it well, it should stick.
For the purposes of this conversation, because standardization, in my opinion, is another step. For the purposes of this conversation, I'd like to keep it to the concept of small versus big, and I'd like to presume that they both catch well. And I don't want to go into whether a small basket catches big or not. You can bring that up if you'd like, Jeremy. I see your face. And speaking of your face, why don't we go to Jeremy? And
You want me to talk about my face, or you want to talk about the?
you can do both, I bet.
All right. Well, the reason I made that face is because I think that that's a very important point of the subject. I think that you guys have all made really great points. I think that the catchability of the target is a very important part of this debate because right now, as it stands, I know Paul, Macbeth, and I were talking about this earlier. The basket, as it is now, was designed for a lid or a frisbee. And now we're using discs, which are smaller and faster. But I actually believe that the amount of space that we have off the pole in terms of chains and all the suspension that we have and the double layers of chains, and now we have the new baskets, the Mach X and the T1s and T2s that have the cross-chain technology and all that to slow the disc down, is important for as fast as our discs are coming to the basket. The game itself is rapidly advancing, and I think it's really important that we keep the excitement of long putts, long shots going in. I think it builds excitement. I don't think it does the opposite. I don't think people get bored by seeing people make great shots. I think that if we make the basket smaller, we eliminate that. I've personally played a tournament on the bullseye target, I believe it is. I know you have as well. Okay, so have all of us played? Yeah, okay, so all of us besides Joel know. But yeah, so I personally, from my personal experience, the event was a lot less fun. It's a tournament that I've played several years. I've actually never missed it before. And so this one year we tried this experiment. We played with a smaller basket. In my experience, even though I won the tournament, I left there feeling kind of dull. It didn't seem like, it didn't have the same excitement. It lost its experience. And I think part of that is course design. I don't think that it's all based on basket. I think the course design, if it's done well, it rewards good putting regardless of how big the basket is. And I think that's a really important thing. I think it's more important than the size of the basket is how can we design courses that truly engage first and second shot and maybe even third shots. But as far as the basket goes, I think that you can't disregard the way that it catches. Because as of right now, if you have a headwind putt on a basket that's elevated, depending on how hard the headwind is, the basket can be as big as you want it to be. That disc is not staying in the basket. And we make it smaller, that putt becomes virtually impossible. And so, I think that we have to consider the elements as a part of this discussion as well. When the elements are the wind's blowing and all the other, it's cold out, we don't have the feel on our, of our putters as we're putting. All these things make disc golf different and difficult in ways that other sports don't quite have. It's one of the elements of our sport that's unique. And I think if we lose that by trying to make things more difficult, we lose sight of the fact that how we can lose the spirit that kind of captured us in the first place, making putts. I know we're talking about on a pro level here. I'm not talking about amateur across all levels of the sport. I know that's not the discussion, but I don't know. I think that it still translates to the professional level. I think that making the basket smaller has a lot of negative side effects too, although there are some good ones too. I'm more of the undecided than a complete no, but I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical at this point.
You make some very good points against it going smaller. So, and I have nothing to clarify. I think you did a very good job.
I toss.
And Jessica, do you have some thoughts as well that you want to add to Jeremy's thoughts against?
I definitely think that the fact that he was saying that all of the elements that when you're playing you have to take into consideration. If you're putting in a headwind or a tailwind, it's going to change everything. Like you said, it's not going to make the putt easier. It's obviously going to make it harder. So if you make the target smaller, it's going to make it twice as hard or 3 times as hard. And personally, I putt all kinds of different ways. I putt Anheuser, hyzer, flat, and I feel like I've adjusted my putt to the elements or the situations that I'm in. If I get, pinned up against trees, my putt's not going to be the same. And I feel like if it's a smaller target, maybe a certain putt won't even go in if I'm pinned behind a tree and I have a certain angle. it might be almost impossible to even get it in the basket. That's why I put multiple different styles, because I like to be able to make the target of the basket larger from wherever I put myself.
So, you have more?
I also was going to add one more thing.
Sorry.
I know that Steady Ed, when he was first inventing this sport, he put a lot of time and thought into designing this basket, and he's no longer with us, of course. So I feel like we would almost be stepping on his toes if we were trying to change the sport and change his design of the basket. I feel like that would almost take away from the history of disc golf.
So I heard Sarah and Jessica touch on a similar theme. Sarah said spectate, which is more important, spectators or the game? And Jessica said that if we go to a different part of the if for example a headwind putt is virtually impossible because of the size of the basket, that's a concept that people watching might not fully understand.
Yeah.
And the importance becomes the upshot and where you're placing it. And I want to go to the people who say, yes, we should make the basket smaller. Obviously, one of the goals of the Pro Tour is to bring spectators in. If we make the game even more esoteric by saying, okay, now we have to, the wind is going right to left, so you absolutely have to get to the right of the pin, the commentators aren't always going to explain that very well. And when the shot goes to the left, the commentators aren't always going to know that was actually a missed shot and a bad play, and they've got a really tough putt. And telling that story is pretty difficult. What do you think about the concept of it? Which is more important, the spectators or the game? Oh, Paul,
Jump in, dude.
Paul, jump in.
I'll answer.
So yeah, so one thing about like spectating other sports, things like that, so many people have played golf, right? They know how difficult it is. So when they see these guys, have you guys ever watched golf? It's one of the most boring things you've ever seen in your life, unless you've played it.
Unless you understand.
Unless you understand the game. Like when they're hitting their drives, they're hitting them 300 yards, and all you see is the white ball in the sky. That's it. That's it. And then it lands. And if you're there in person, then you see them hitting it 330 yards, and you're like, oh my goodness, like this is the most impressive thing I've ever seen. You know, and that's the same thing with disc golf. Like you could watch us play and watch these putts go in, but unless you've played, you're not going to understand, right? And so as the game grows, as more people understand, that'll come with it. So I don't think that should be, I don't think right now that should be a factor in us moving the game forward, because once somebody plays it, they'll understand. Whether it's a small basket, a big basket, or whatever, they'll understand. Right now, people just don't even know. You know, but the people who do know, if we have a smaller target, they'll understand. It'll still be exciting. It's not going to take away from the excitement of the person who actually understands this one.
And when somebody does execute on a smaller
They'll
target,
understand, right?
and when you do that, it's going to be something that's talked about more. A throw-in or a long putt. What's a throw-in now is a 70-footer, 61-footer right now. When people are throwing in this room on a daily basis. So, and that's like with people in golf, you don't see many, hits in from the fairway. They're all, if they put it to 2 feet, that's a highlight. And our sport, when somebody parks something from 300 feet on a difficult green in the wind, they put it right. That's something that we should highlight. We don't talk about approaches to the green enough. And I think that what you're saying is that if we grow the sport in the right way, people will understand at what capacity we're doing things. We're understanding that we do need to land to the right side of the basket. And with commentators, I know you mentioned this, Steve, that a commentator is going to be able to express that. We have a right to left wind. Players are going to be looking to try and land. You see the green tree to the right. They're going to want it to the basket. They're going to want to be putting their approaches or drives or whatever it is to this side to have the better opportunity to make birdie on this putt. They'll be able to express that with the advancements in technology and knowledge of our sport. So I think that when it comes to commentators, that's only going to grow with all of us getting better as well.
Sure, we have a huge advantage with golf already before us because people understand golf. So disc golf, it's completely translated into them already understanding the rules and what we're trying to accomplish.
Sarah.
It seems like the spectator experience is going to be seen in like one or like what we're having trade-offs here, right? So if the basket is smaller, all of a sudden we're not seeing hardly any aces, much less aces, and we're also seeing almost no throw-ins.
How many aces have we seen this year?
25.
We're also seeing
All of them.
Jeremy.
All the answer. How many have there been?
we're also going to see an increase in missed putts from a short distance. And we're also going to see an increase of people laying up putts from a relatively short distance.
Yep.
Right. So is that the spectator experience we want versus what we have now?
You see that-
Do we want less aces, less throw-ins, more layups, more missed putts?
If people understand the game, if they understand the game, then that's fine.
Yes.
If that's part of the game, then that's fine.
Does
Because it makes it that much more.
Does the boredom, though, that we're experiencing because of the 30 footers offset the negative effects that would happen for the short basket?
But there's no boredom if they play it. As the game grows.
But there are, I mean, spectators walk away from the greens and go to the next hole all the time.
Well,
They know they're going to make that 20-footer.
We're talking about changing this on the pro level.
Right.
So these people who putt on our giant baskets, which, by the way, sometimes they're not that big. Okay? Just keep in mind that we've all had bad putting days. Looking at you, Paul, I've seen you miss some putts. It was like 3 years ago, but he did it, I swear.
He did it.
But like we've all had those days where the basket looks like a pinhead. You know, you can't even dream of making it. So then we're talking about making it smaller, and we got these people who come from the experience of playing on their park courses with these giant baskets, and then they see us just slopping around putts left and right. It's like, what's going on?
Okay.
That's a good point.
So they
because-
understand the game.
See, but I don't think that's a fair comparison because you go back to like in traditional golf, the courses that these guys are playing, they're playing from the white tees on these tiny courses with no OB. If you go to a professional tournament, these courses are ridiculous. They're long, they're challenging.
Courses
OB
are.
ever.
Yes.
Um,
Of course, we can all agree that course
I mean,
design is it.
That's made for us.
I'd like to say
Those-
something.
Those courses are made for us. That's what I'm saying. If
Yeah.
we're going to compare them, those courses are made for the best players in the world.
Yeah.
Then-
I'd like
then-
to say something.
Let's let Jessica finish this off and then we'll.
I personally think that we are playing the Disc Golf Pro Tour and they're creating these courses harder so that they're challenging us. And these people who are building the courses, they obviously know disc golf and they're building them to challenge the professional top players. If we go to Idlewild and they have small little baskets, you know how many people are going to love to come back? Honestly.
It's definitely going to make a difference in the,
I'm just
in the-
saying.
Personal opinion.
the jump to the professional level and to playing these top tier events. I think that there will be people like, there's definitely less people are going to be inclined to do that. And that jump is going to be more drastic.
So the base question that I'm hearing is, right now, we get an ace and it gets on ESPN. If we went to smaller baskets, a shot that landed under the basket would warrant being on ESPN. But how long would it take before the
It wouldn't
spectators,
get there.
I don't think that it would.
Yes.
I don't think it would.
how long before the spectators understand that in fact is a great shot? Because we all know right now an ace is actually arguably a missed throw where you're going to go 80 feet past. And so right now that arguably is not a great shot. The great shot is under the basket,
We're still
but
gonna,
people don't understand that.
we're still going to have aces. I mean, you have to hit the center of the target. So if this basket's going to catch, then it's still going to hit the center of the basket. We're still going to have aces. Like it's not just
We,
going to
we will
The frequency
definitely
of
have
that.
less. We'll definitely have less.
I'm curious, when we say smaller basket, I think it's important that we discuss what percentage are we talking about in terms of its decrease, and the logistics of like how, like we were talking about this earlier, we don't need to discuss how it catches, but it's a very important part of this. But like for me, I have some ideas, and I know I've discussed this. I mean, this is something this is a topic we've talked
Right.
about for years.
Exactly.
And I appreciate allowing us to bring it to, maybe some other people's attention, that it's a topic that, we're addressing now. But in conversations I've had in the past, I think one of the things I think that people think of when they think of smaller baskets is bringing it this way. And I think that becomes a problem because you don't have enough, I don't know if the right word is insulation on the pole with space before it hits this pole and bounces back out. But the catching becomes very difficult. Instead of bringing it this way, I think maybe you could perhaps bring it an inch or two, but bringing it this way the height up and down. We can keep it almost on the pole every time, but can we keep it the right height?
Yeah.
Left to right, that's a problem with breaking the wrist or not committing to your line. But once you get that down, the height with the headwind dropping, lifting, and getting just the nose angle correct, that's a problem that most of us have. I think that might be the way to do it if you were to do it. And I think it's just important that we kind of discuss that so we can kind of gauge whether or not it will work.
You mentioned that the original basket was designed for a lid. And now our discs are probably about 2/3 the size of a lid.
Mm-hmm.
The solution feels like, especially to respect Ed's original design, which I think is a great point, make the basket 2/3 the size. That's, I think, conceptually the thought. But I'm going to go over to Joel now.
Yeah, I actually have another engagement, so I have to leave soon. But I just wanted to say 2 quick things. One, and I don't want to speak for anybody else on the yes or for side or whatever, but I think I'm safe in assuming no one is for making a basket that is smaller but doesn't catch any points. You know what I mean? So I'm just assuming. I mean, I can certainly at least say for myself, and I think the vast majority of people that are for shrinking the target, we're only for this happening if we can come up with a design solid enough to catch regularly. And the other quick thing I just wanted to throw in, I know one of the most common issues in this conversation is that, this whole concept of will it decrease the excitement? You're not going to see as many huge putts go in. You're not going to see as many aces, which probably is true, which is almost certainly true. But one, Paul made a point that the baskets, you have to hit center enough that you'll still see them going in. And two, those long putts, those 60, 70 footers or whatever, how many times have you guys seen in the heat of the moment, the guy cranks back and puts it just right in park? You know what I mean? Those will still sit.
Mm-hmm.
You still see that happen. All those 70, 80 footers or whatever from way outside. I can picture more of them hitting dead center in history than barely catching on the outside, trickling in, you know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to argue that we still will see that happen, even though. So I don't think the fear is
To your very first point, though,
sure.
One of the reasons you argued to make the basket smaller is because when you hit the heart of the chains and the other guy dribbles one in, that's aggravating.
Yeah.
So to your point, it feels like a contradiction there, where you're saying the putts are hitting dead center, but the ones that don't are aggravating.
We
So
also have ones that are
No,
dead
I'm
center
just
that don't
saying-
go in still.
Yeah.
That's still
Right.
that still happens.
No, my
That's
point.
Design.
My point is just.
a good putt will
My
still go.
point is if we for the person out there thinking, if we shrink the targets, we're never going to see any putts go in from more than 40 feet. I'm
Okay.
responding with, okay, you still see plenty of outside 40 footers hit so dead center clean. Those
Yeah.
will still stay.
My question though is how many of those putts are even going to be run? If the basket is
Sure.
that hard to get it in, how much is this going to change the
Sure.
putting game to the point where people are going to lay up 60 footers
Right.
rather than run them?
Okay, I got something then. So
Thank
what
you,
if you
John.
made a smaller target that caught better than every single basket we have now? Wouldn't everybody before that? 100%. If a smaller target caught better than every basket that we have now, wouldn't every single professional before that?
Well,
So that you
we could
could-
start right here. We have 5 people
that-
right here.
So that you could, if you hit it on your spot, it's guaranteed to stay every time. Would you guys agree?
Are you good?
I'm back.
I mean,
Okay.
to me, that's not the same issue though. Like, it's not more important than.
I'm all for a
The
basket that
size.
catches perfectly,
Like-
regardless of the
So
size.
it's just another point to bring up.
Yeah.
To your point, Sarah, how many are going to be run? It now becomes a technique, because right now there's a level of play that players are running putts from 60, 70 feet with no remorse. They don't even they don't care what happens. Put me to 25 feet, and that's we shouldn't be out here wild gunslinging. We should be playing golf. We should be making smart decisions. You should be able to control the disc from 70 feet to give it a chance, but still leave yourself with another routine putt from there. And I think that challenges players on all. Now we're challenging players every step of the way down the fairway to the green and to the basket.
So I'd like to say something just real quick
Just
to Paul's point.
Yeah, okay.
So we're talking about designing a perfect target. I think it's important to keep in mind we're still tossing rigid projectiles through the air with the elements that can throw our things around into fluid-like chain objects that we're supposed to slow it down. There's no perfect design. We're never going to run.
I said better than that.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, regardless of what happens, there's going to be intangibles and variables that our sport inherently has attached to it forever. We're never going to be able to design something that catches perfect. There's going to be great putts that are going to go out. There's going to be garbage putts that stay in. Eliminating that as much as possible. Can we do that with a more efficient, smaller area? I would be more open to that. I think it becomes difficult when you take the surface area. If you take the canvas, the size of our basket, we shrink it down. I think it becomes a problem with thinking about the logistical ways that it catches better. I think
Yes.
that's part of my objection to it, is that I think that I don't know how we can engineer something that could potentially do that.
Think about the chains,
That's
being
right.
how far out they are now, and that's why when we see the weird cut throughs,
Right.
because there's so much of the basket.
More
to
chains
go.
closer together also means
So
a lot
I-
of putts.
Come pushing out. Yes,
I don't
that's-
wanna-
That's the hard.
I don't want
that's
to
the hard
overly focus on design. I think Joel's point was 100% correct. We're arguing, presuming the basket is as good or better than current baskets, should the target be smaller? That's, for the time being, that should be the focus.
Okay. I won't focus on it.
You can keep not, that's okay. I'll just keep saying that. Before we get to that, Sarah, I want to go to the people that say, no, don't shrink the basket. At Maple Hill Hole 1, we increased the distance of the basket. We basically made the peninsula bigger. So now if you want a birdie, you either need to attack your second shot and get into the green, or you need to hit a 60 to 70 footer. When we initially created that peninsula, it was a 20-footer to 30-footer if you got to the mouth. And it turned out that was too easy. And so we made it a 60-footer. So now you need to attack that green. We literally redesigned the course because 90% of Circle 1 putts are going in. Did we do a good thing, and every other course should recognize that and redesign? Or should we say the courses are okay the way they are and let's make the basket a little harder to catch?
One thing that I'd have to say is, like, I've been putting in the same size basket for 17 years. And I feel like if we're going to change the design and everything like that, I feel like I would have to change my putt ultimately. So if you're shrinking the target size, are you trying to please the spectators, or are you trying to make the players change the way that they attack the basket? That's what I'm trying to decide right now.
It's a great question.
I think that this is bigger than anyone that's up on this panel right now. I don't think that this discussion is about us and our playing time. Honestly, I think this is about what's best for the future of the sport, and I think that we have to think about it in terms of, is this challenge important for the sport to grow? I don't know right now. I think that, touching on your point earlier about Steady Ed's basket design, I think that Steady Ed would never want the sport to restrict its growth as we continue to learn about ourselves and learn about our sport, and we're progressing, to ever just say, you know what, this should be like this forever. We should always be willing to move as the sport continues to grow. Just like course design, just like moving Hole 1's basket back further. Keeping in mind that we need to learn from statistics, from the way that the players continue to improve, all these things. Making this basket smaller makes it more difficult. Yeah, in a way that kind of does weed out the green with rock. Is it what we need to do that, or better course design? I mean, that's the debate, I think, is if you want to make things more difficult, is it about the course design itself, or is it about the baskets being smaller? That's a hard thing.
The reason I asked the question is because 99% of the courses out there, we're probably 90%, were designed for before players got ridiculously good at putting. Circle 1 putting is a basically insignificant statistic nowadays. And the real statistic is Circle 1 in regulation.
You guys, geez, I don't know.
So, go ahead, Paul, I'm sorry.
No, so we're talking about the growth of the game. I feel like as we've made the baskets catch better, obviously the sports are growing fast. So it is exciting. People are getting on ESPN. People are shooting 18 downs. The growth right now is at a really, really good pace. Can it be faster with a smaller target? Right? Is that what we're going to discuss?
Are those two things even related though? It's, to me, it's a coincidence that the baskets have caught better and the numbers have grown. It's not because the numbers are not growing because the baskets are catching better. To me, those are not correlated.
Does the sport become more fun? Does the sport become more fun? Like, is that, what's the point of the topic? Is the topic that people are tired of looking in from their homes and Norman, Oklahoma, seeing that we shot 16 down? Is that like a problem that Bill from Nebraska saw that we shot 16 down? Or is it a problem that the tournament director doesn't want, or the course designer doesn't want his course shredded? Like, what's the problem? Like, we are disc golf. We're a sport where we figured out how to throw a disc through the air and how to be pretty accurate and how to throw these things towards a chain target that catches them. We're pretty good at it. But there's a big disparity from the top and the bottom. And we don't need to lose sight of that, because just because people are shooting that at the top, there's still people that are like not that much, and they're pretty dang good, and still the top 1% of the professionals that are still 15 to 20 to 30 strokes behind these guys, and they're in the same division. Like, we're talking about disparity here. We're talking about eliminating the middle class by making baskets even harder. We're talking about taking away, making the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. And it's like,
That's a great question.
I like that.
That's a great question to ask. And I think, I mean, for me, and I mean, you guys can certainly object. For me, I'm coming into this thinking, okay, our, I don't want to say audience, but the people who pertain to this conversation are us, the professional disc golfers, the Disc Golf Pro Tour. That's what this is all for. It's for, like you're saying, separating the cream from the crop. You know what I mean? It doesn't make it more fun for Joe Schmo, who's 400 rated. You know what I mean? Like, he can go to his local course, double the targets in the local courses, like, because that'll make it super fun. You know what I mean? Like, but while we're playing for, you know, $5,000, $10,000 prizes and hopefully rising, you know, we want that stuff. In my mind, I mean, at least I do. Another quick thing, just while this is kind of backpedaling slightly, I think when we, you know, so if the targets go smaller, I don't know that we will have an increase in layups, but I think it'll be slight. I think what we'll see instead of more layups will be more technical putting styles. I think we'll see people get really creative, players develop really impressive putting styles to still be able to not have to lay up.
You've been adapting your putt and style, Jessica, for years.
Yeah.
It hasn't been the same. I feel like it changes every day.
For sure.
So I don't know what I'm doing half the time. But to get to that point of we're going to separate, which is good because we can go and play places where take a local A tier, where an amateur score on the same place, and this is sometimes doesn't happen, is good enough to be competing in open. If you go to golf, our sister sport, or you go to any other sport, an amateur basketball team goes and plays against a professional basketball team. No chance. Same thing in golf. An amateur golfer doesn't go on the weekend playing against Jordan Spieth and those guys and has a chance to be putting up a competitive score with them. That doesn't happen. Where we need that separation is good because now there's a longer grind to get there and people will have to work for it.
One thing I'd like to add to that is when you see professional basketball players or anything like that, they didn't make their targets smaller or bigger for the
moved the three-point
amateur
line
league.
out.
The three-point line
They've
out.
moved. In football, the field goal kicker, the field goal goalposts have gotten smaller.
Okay.
If you look at in soccer and as we grow up, the ball actually gets bigger, which that hasn't any reference here, but we do see changes along the way as the sport grows as the level goes.
So I think we're getting ready to go to the audience questions.
I have a couple comments I've been patiently waiting to say.
Sorry, Sarah, too late. Okay, go ahead. Sarah. For anybody who didn't see my face, I was kidding. Sarah, go ahead and make a couple comments. And then what I want to do, I'm going to ask a couple of quick questions, quick yes, no answers to you guys, and then we'll get some questions from the audience, and then we will wrap this up. Go ahead, Sarah.
So my first comment is that the PDGA has a game development team that tries to answer these types of questions and whether this is good for the sport or not. And they've been doing trial runs of small baskets for several years, and they have some data that would be very interesting to look at. My personal experience, I found when I miss a putt, I miss it bad enough that I would miss it on a small basket or a large basket. And it didn't make a big difference when I was putting on smaller baskets, but I'm a push putter, so the skinny baskets are fine. I miss them high or low, I don't miss them left or right? So it does matter the technique you use. And I would love to see what the PDGA game development team, the statistics they've developed to decide how good these small, I mean, they've only used the bullseyes. They haven't used necessarily the ones with the basket we're talking about. But to me, that's very, very interesting. Now, to Jeremy's point, why are we even having this discussion? Because putting is too easy. Putting is too easy, right? According to some people.
Yeah,
According to our statistics, it also is easy.
Well, our circle,
so-
our circle is
it's
also
getting
10 meters.
easier
It should be
and easier
15.
per player. It's getting easier.
So there's a lot of ways we can attack this without making the basket smaller too. We can make the basket smaller, and that would probably make a significant difference. However, we could also block 2/3 of the green with bushes. We could do other things, making entryways into the greens. We can do other things that make the scoring different. Like he said, moving on hole one, we can do other things.
Course design.
So are we okay
Yes.
though? Like as a community, I can't tell you how many times a touring pro says, "Oh, I threw these perfect shots. I was inside the circle. I didn't even have a look." How can I be inside the circle and not be able to make a putt? I mean, I've also played tournaments where it seemed like every single putt I had to make was a straddle or around some tree or up and over this thing. You know, so there's a lot of ways we can make the scoring of putting the ultimate goal, right? Putting is too easy. The ultimate goal is that. There's more than one way than just making the basket smaller. I mean, if we got to course design, that would do it. Maybe making the basket smaller would be a second step to try to make them putting harder.
So,
Maybe
Well,
first
we've
we
already
try to
taken
make.
steps
maybe
with, like,
first-
high rises and stuff like that.
Are we okay though as a community with portions of the inside the circle being basically unavailable to make your putt?
Yes.
Putting the onus on the upshot to make your approach harder. Is that okay with everyone? Are they okay with being inside the circle and not having a look because they didn't throw a good approach?
I'm used to like deuce or die, so you have to make your putt no matter where you are.
Right, and so making putting harder would we could add bushes and other obstacles inside of the green to make it so you have to.
Fairness becomes fairness. That's course design fairness. It's like,
I think that the last thing I'll say, Steve, I know you have these questions you just want to ask.
that's the only reason I'm here.
Okay. I'm gonna give you a chance to talk. Just hold on a second. I think that the main thing that we're talking about with making the basket smaller is the importance of bringing in the quality of the drive, the approach, and the putt. That's what a smaller basket does. It makes each one of these more difficult and more rewarding. Course design can do that too. That's my point. Is that course design can make the drives, and if the approach is difficult, if it's a wide open 100-foot approach, we're getting it up and down 99% of the time.
Think
But
of-
1% of the time is if we get spit out.
Think about some a handful of courses that we do play.
Day long.
I'd say I'll use Fountain Hills as an example. Very open. There's not a lot
Yeah.
going on. You, as us as players, are just like, I'm gonna throw it close. I'm gonna throw a putt. I'm gonna throw it close. I'm gonna throw a putt. And you get into that rhythm, and that's not challenging us. Courses can't can't adapt.
Right.
Other courses can,
Right.
like Maple Hills.
Yeah.
A lot of the ones that we are playing, which is great. So we won't need targets there.
Yep.
I'm not saying we do targets and not targets, but we have to move away from the courses that we've outplayed.
Seems like the toughest courses we play, they all have that on almost every grade, to where if you miss your putt, it could be kind of.
So thank you guys. And the primary reason I want to move along is because we all know if you talk for more than 2 hours, people won't listen. And Terry Miller has proven that.
Are we losing our following base?
Exactly. People are tuning out. So
Not wrestling.
quick yes. These are yes, no questions, and then we'll go to the audience. And I'll start with Joel. Just quick yes, no. These are questions that were asked throughout the day, and we didn't get specific answers. The first question, are free throws boring? Joel?
No.
Yes.
No.
Okay, so 5 no's, 1 yes. Is the sport fun because the basket is big? Or because the basket is its current size? Jessica?
No.
Yes.
No.
No.
All right. So,
You're right.
so
Eh.
this next question is only to Jeremy because he said yes. Is that good?
Yeah, I think I
Is that
absolutely.
good?
Oh, wait, do I have, is it yes or no, or is?
Yeah. Is that good? Is it good that the sport is fun because the baskets are good?
You don't
Big.
want me to explain?
Nope.
Yes?
Nope, no explanation.
All right, then yes.
That's yes question marks for the record.
Okay, so this next one is not a yes, no. It's a 10, 20, or something else. 10-meter circle or 20-meter circle. That was just brought up, a really interesting point. If you change this from make the basket smaller to make the circle bigger, that is another way to address this, which doesn't involve changing 7,000 courses. Joel, 10 or 20-meter circle?
17.
17.
Middle.
Middle?
I like 20.
10, 17, 15, 20.
So does this mean I can't jump putt from 35?
You can still do what you want. Your
To me, it
grandfather
doesn't
did.
change calling something, calling, you want to say, if there you have a chicken and you have a rooster and you say, I'm going to call this now a rooster. Calling something different doesn't change the game.
Changing
Changes the
the
rules.
rules.
It changes the rules on the way you
It
jump
changes
on
the
it.
statistics.
So 10 meters?
It
You want
changes
10
the
meters?
statistics, that's it.
If you
It's
can't
changing,
fall
so
forward.
it's not changing how someone is playing the game, it's just changing how the
Yeah, it
game
is.
looks.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Somebody,
Yes, on
somebody from
paper.
35
On
feet
paper.
is now is step putting. Now they can't step
No,
out
that's
until they're
not
at
what you said.
45.
You said I can do what I want. You said I can do what I want.
I was kidding, Sarah.
Oh, well, if you mean I can't jump putt from 40 feet.
I was saying that only you can do it. No, I'm sorry.
Wait, just to clarify, you said 10 meters or 20 meters, and Sarah said no.
Yes.
Yes. She just said no.
I think that just happened. Oh, and Sarah, if the rule changes to 20 meters, Sarah is allowed to still jump putt. She's grandfathered. So anointed.
We just get tattoos to
So-
say whether we can or
Sarah,
can't.
should the
You're asking,
circle
are we changing how far away you can jump putt?
should the
Yes.
circle change from 10 to 20?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Jessica.
I guess it just depends on
I'd
if
say
it's
16.
jump putting or if it's just for statistics. Because if it's statistics, I would say like,
No,
Circle.
this is for jump putting. Yeah.
God, I guess I'd say no.
For
So-
the record, women's hands are not as strong, and we
Yeah.
get less spin from the distances we do, and that I think you're making a big disadvantage to women if you're not letting them jump.
That was
up from 10
exactly the
meters.
point I was going to say. We just happened to have 4 men and 2 women. The 4 men said yes, the 2 women said no.
We
That's a,
we struggle to putt from the edge of the circle, let alone
You guys,
outside of it.
women.
The turn is in.
It's not about size.
Well, what if
It's about muscular. Really got testosterone.
What about the women's games?
we have not lost control. We have not lost
All right.
control.
What about the women's game staying where it is and the men's moving there until you can justify it as the men's moves out to 15 or 20 and the women stays at 10 if you guys fit because of those differences because you guys have different pads already, which is going to be tuned for your course your game to challenge you guys. The circle can stay the same because right now I don't like watching dudes who are 6'3" and they do a step putt and they're releasing the putt from 22 feet. And
So-
that,
So
it's
that's
cool.
because
That's
guys are so much bigger than girls.
I know that's what I'm saying. It's like so they're gaining these players are gaining a significant advantage because of the rule being as
Because their arms as
So
long as
let's-
we are.
yes.
So let's reword the question for Sarah and Jessica with Eric's caveat. 10 meters for women, 20 meters for men.
Sure, have at it.
I mean,
Y'all
that
are
seems
good
more
at putting.
likely.
Okay. So at
Doesn't
that
bother
point,
me.
at that point, we're 100% the
Yes.
men should change just on this little panel.
We're
Right
gonna change.
now.
Can change.
And
Except with Trevor, without Trevor.
my last question for you all, and this is well, it is what it is. The question is, and we'll start from Jessica and go around. If the pros play on smaller baskets, will the touring pros that are doing that look worse Like when they look like worse players in the eyes of the spectators.
I mean, if they're going to be watching live, they're going to see us putting on smaller baskets. And obviously, I think if you're going to be shooting on a smaller target, it should make it seem harder, no matter who's watching. If you take a dartboard and you make it way smaller, just to the size of the target, obviously more people are going to miss.
Will the common spectator understand that, or will he think, "Wow, I should turn pro because I can do better than that"?
I don't think that they would think that they should turn pro because they can do that. I think that it just makes it more challenging for the top pros.
Yeah.
Can you reword the question?
Reword it.
No, not reword it. Repeat the question.
Reword it.
Reword the question.
Use it in a sentence.
Will smaller baskets make touring pros look worse? Because people will understand the baskets are small. Correct. Okay, Sarah.
Oh, I think that it will. I think spectators are brutal anyway, online especially. I think that they have no perspective, like on really what's happening, and so maybe the commentation could do a little bit better about that. I don't know, but I'm undecided.
I changed my answer to
I don't
yes.
know.
Good.
Well, she's undecided. I changed my answer to yes, because I think that if you watch people miss over and over again, I think that it loses the appeal of what makes it exciting. People
Why?
making putts.
What making these people
That
pros?
wasn't
What makes
the
these
question.
people special?
Yeah, well, what make pros look worse?
Well,
I think it will make them look worse if they're missing.
To the
constantly.
spectator.
But will the spectators realize that they're putting on a smaller basket? Yes.
Doesn't matter. They're only this far away and they're missing.
I can't tell you how many times I hear a spectator and live spectators say, "Wow, this is so much more impressive in person." Right. So apply that concept to this question.
Okay, so continuing along, Paul.
If they're educated, then I don't think they'll understand that we're the best players in the world, and they'll be able to make that.
So a caveated no.
No. No, we're gonna look good still.
Okay.
We're not talking about your pants.
Don't-
Yeah, he's got pink pants. Of course he's gonna look good.
Yep. You know what I'm doing?
I say no. I think,
Pros will still look good.
yeah.
Okay.
Spectator fans will get their hands on their own little tiny basket. They'll understand how hard it is.
That-
Oh my gosh.
That comment is one comment that was fed to me outside of this, and I think it was a valid comment. Like,
Yeah.
the pros
I
The
think
pros are the best in the world, and we need people to understand.
when they
So,
look at that smaller basket, the mystery and oh my gosh, how difficult is that? Will go through the roof. So I don't think that.
so, Paul, did you want to say one thing while I turn around and see if anybody has a question?
We're good.
Okay. So now I want to ask all of you guys here. First of all, thank you for your patience and for listening in. Does anybody here have a question that they would like to ask that they think will help move this forward? We'll start with Paul.
I guess you kind of mentioned it earlier, but a lot of the disc golf pro tours going from like MPO is playing different pads and FPO, so it doesn't necessarily have to switch baskets for FPO.
Good question.
That is a good question.
So let's start over here with people that think that we should have smaller baskets. Should we have smaller baskets for both men and women?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could do it any way we want. I think to start at just an MPO, and then every other division can play on a little bit or whatever. We could do it however we want.
So open to the idea of having two distinct games going on at the same
Sure.
time.
I think both open divisions, the ladies and the men, the open divisions. We are the best players. We should be challenged at that. Now we are changing the courses for the ladies to better suit their games to where they're not just immediately punished on tee pads because of distance restrictions and stuff like that. But I think as the baskets go, that is a universal spot. Tee pads, baskets, those are universal things across the board. They should stay the same.
So you would say that the men and women both should play on smaller baskets, and you were open to the women not changing baskets.
Sure.
So interestingly enough, Paul's found a point that divides you two, which is really interesting.
He's open to both of the ideas.
Don't change his words.
So let's go to the undecided and see what they say.
So it's different in disc golf because we're all part of the PGA. Like if you were to bring other sports involved, they have the WNBA, the NBA, the LPGA, the PGA. It's two completely separate things.
Entities, right?
Right. And so since we all of us are the best players in the world, then I think it would.
Fair
In the interest of the original point, which was to make putting harder, because putting is too easy, quote unquote, I would think that putting is not too easy in the women's division. We are seeing scoring separation inside of the circle still. So if we're trying to make that distinction, then it's not appropriate for the women at this point because we're not 95% inside of the circle. So
This is a fantastic question. If we're splitting you guys up, Jeremy.
I think that Sarah's point is exactly what I was. Thank you for saying that. I agree with Sarah completely. I think that in basketball, you have a 28.5 inch diameter for basketball versus a 30 for the men, I believe it is, something like that. I'm not sure if that's exactly what it is.
Same hoop size?
Same hoop size, but different size basketball.
Interesting.
volleyball, same thing, different heights.
Different
So we
height
get
nets
smaller
for.
frisbees?
And I think that there's still limitations.
That's an advantage.
Yeah. Jessica?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I was almost done talking. No, I think that when we talk about physical limitations of the male versus female, I think that you can account for that in our sport too. I mean, we already have that with different tees, but I think that baskets are certainly fair. If we're seeing scoring separation already in that circle, why do we need to make it even more so? Why do we need to continue to do that?
I would have to agree with Sarah and Jerm. I don't see a huge scoring separation in the women's field on the putting green. So I don't see really changing the baskets for us would, improve or, take away from anyone in our division. I feel like no matter what, it's pretty equal right now. I mean, it just depends on how much you practice your putting, honestly.
I think back to my point is because we're all under the same body, like we're going to be on the course at the same time a lot of the time, so this is going to be extremely difficult to change out the baskets.
The logistics are a nightmare, I agree.
Yeah, I agree
And
with
so
that.
that was the only reason I made the point of they have the LPGA and the PGA.
Right.
It's really easy for them to
The
You guys
So
are
I
on
guess we
different
should start the
courses.
LPDGA?
The first step is to determine the ideal. Once you determine that, you determine if it's possible to do the logistics. But the first step has to be the ideal. Paul, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so these three right here they should be in the same baskets, correct? On both sides.
only
Yeah.
because of the
Yeah,
same.
okay, but
True.
these two right there. But you guys also said that you wouldn't care if the circles were different, men or women, but you feel like the baskets should be the same.
So
I'm just curious why.
Yeah, that's funny.
the thought comes to where what Sarah brings in as the differences in what we are able to do is a little bit different from what the female can do. And it's not taking away from what they do on the course because they attack the courses and they throw the shots to a very professional level. And that's what sets them apart. I know they don't get the credit they deserve online because trolls are awful. But it helps keep things a little more balanced, like in as far as the ball goes in basketball, what Jerm said. You keep their circle size a little bit shorter so that they can still reach those putts and they're not just, all right, cool, I'm at 35 feet, I'm inside the circle, I can't jump. It's
That's
just,
where we get worse stats.
yeah, you just lay it up every single time. I think it still helps keep the stats similar to the men's division and it keeps the scoring still very competitive by having the two different circles.
So I'm going to go ahead and answer the question in a different way. If I was in Eric's shoes, I could easily see the basket needs to be the same because it's a piece of equipment on the course. But the 10 and 20 meter circle, there's no, just the aesthetic of it is, there's really nothing there to see. So, but if there was a different sized basket, you would just say, whoa, what's up with the women? But a 10 and 20 meter circle, that's a different thing. It's an aesthetic that you don't really notice. And I could see changing that because of hand size or some logical thing. But the basket size, I can see how the two are not in conflict. Let's go to, Drew had a question first and then Steve.
Well, that was my actual question. Like, that was what I was going to touch on. Look at this thing because she said that more smaller hands, less power, less spin. And I was going to.
It's not size of hand, it's musculature of your hands.
Biology.
It's not size
Just
necessarily,
cost.
it's musculature.
I have small, strong.
Yeah, I probably have bigger hands than Steve, but he can open the pickle jar and I can't.
Dang, Steve. Manly man.
We're going to get over there to Steve. Steve.
So listening to this is very, very interesting as we see the debate of separation, okay, and whether or not course designers can create separation in what they're doing and how they're building courses nowadays to to make the approach shots more difficult, to have to go into tunnels, and to have to do different things with the course design, create separation on the pro level. Regular golf is a 4.5-inch cut for the women and for the men. Okay, we've modeled our sport behind regular golf this entire time. So that changing the target the way that we've done with a million different manufacturers, with bigger rims, deeper rims, more chains, less chains, and I'm just curious. I think that's taken away from the game. I think that if we could create something that is a standard across all levels, at least for the pro tour, not 7,000 courses. That's going to be logistically an absolute nightmare. But just for the pro tour, just for the top players in the world, keep that basket uniform everywhere you're playing in Utah. You know, and as a spectator, I watched the tournament in Utah with the Bullseyes. It was the most boring thing I've ever seen in my life.
Playing it was very different.
Yeah, it was very hard as a spectator to watch that tournament and get excited about anything that was going on. How easy is it going to be to get a layup shot on SportsCenter on the top 10?
Really hard.
Can I
How hard
counter?
is that going to be?
I'm gonna counter the previous tournaments that have been played on marksman baskets. We shouldn't be looking at those in particular because those are on other practice baskets.
The worst catching
You're way
baskets.
too small.
They're the worst catching baskets of the day. They're a Mach 3.
But if you think it's been you,
I'm kidding.
Let's not
I'm
throw
kidding.
it.
So to justify when we move to if we move to a smaller target, it won't be until we have something that is legitimate and catches well. Those tournaments that you watch, we had to play extra smart and extra safe because we had $5,000 on the line. We had a couple $1,000
We're
on
not
the line.
used to playing those, so we don't know how to adjust yet.
Yeah, so we're not used to that. So the growth would happen in those tournaments. Those tournaments are great because it did emphasize if you put it to 5 feet, no, that's amazing. If you put it to 20 feet,
You still have to make the
you
cut.
don't know. You really don't. You couldn't run those putts. So that's to use just to counter that one point is when we move to a smaller target, if it happens, it will be to a high standard that catches well, that all of us would be in agreement on that this is a good bet.
Let's let Sarah go, and then
Just a
Jeremy.
real quick, just a side note to what you were talking about. The cup size is the same on the LPG and the PGA. Now, what most people don't realize though is that yes, the cup size is the same, but the grass is longer for the women. They also put them in places that are not as sloped. They definitely make course adjustments to the greens for the women that the men are not. Basically, we know this because when Michelle Wee, I believe, when she joined and tried to make it on the PGA tour, that was the hardest thing for her to adjust to because the grass was cut much shorter and the whole pit placements were much more difficult than on the LPGA tour.
Great,
So that's just
great point.
Just
Thank you.
a
I think-
side comment.
I think that you talk about well, we're talking about putting the best of the best, like the MPO and the FPO, right? Well, isn't that just the open division?
Mixed.
It doesn't,
Yes.
and mixed pro open, right? That is the elite. That's the top level that we have in our sport.
Correct.
Female can play that. Any age can play that.
Yeah.
As an open division at this stage, and it's the hardest division to play at. I don't think there's any problem with having a more difficult standard for the MPO than for the FPO. I think that, talking about logistically, yes, obviously toting 36 baskets or however many versus 18 is difficult. Setting them up and breaking them down and getting them switched out in time for the MPO after the FPO plays or putting the FPO after the MPO plays is difficult. But we're talking about ideal situation, and there's no problem with having a more difficult target if we do decide to go that route for just the MPO division, because that is the elite level. That is the top level. And if the FPO want to play on that elite level, they have that option. That is their choice. They can decide to do that if they so desire.
It is a legitimately different division.
It is a
Yeah.
completely different division. And yes, it is the top of the female and then the top of the rest of the world. It doesn't have to be just the top. I mean, it is the top. Yes. It's what we break it down. It's how we think of it. But yeah, I mean, they're in different divisions.
One thing that Steve said that I think was interesting is he said it was boring. It was very boring to watch. And I'm going to guess that the reason it was boring to watch is because we're not used to it. A 150-foot upshot landing within 5 feet doesn't seem exciting until you realize that a 10-foot putt's hard. So to Paul's point, once the spectators figure out, oh, whoa, this is a different game now, then what you're watching for becomes different.
And I'm totally undecided on the size of the basket.
Sure.
As a player and a professional, not very good professional, as a professional myself, and playing in these events, in my opinion, the basket could be smaller to make it more difficult, but I just think it should be the same. I think that you guys, whether you're traveling from here or there or where you're going, that on a professional level, that you shouldn't have to worry about a different style of basket every time you go out.
That's a different conversation.
That is a
that's-
different conversation. And let's jump to Dutch now.
My question is like, whenever Steady Ed designed the game, how big was the frisbee then? And then they went to the smaller disc and more beveled edge. Like, we didn't change the target, but I don't know, like, that has something to do with the reason he made it the size it is now.
So we'd already touched on that. The basket, when he designed the basket, it was basically for a lid, an alternate disc or something, maybe a little smaller. And just now we're two-thirds the size of that. It never changed. And then the other thought behind that is the game's very fun to play because it's, or if you're very good, it's relatively easy to putt. And that's fun. People like success. It's, making the basket smaller, would that curb our success? So lots to deal with. Go ahead, Henry, and then Steve.
So on a similar topic, I always, and I think most people will never forget their first ace in disc golf. It's a really magical thing the first time you throw a disc, and whether it does exactly what you want or not, it ended up where you wanted to. So, I know some people that play golf pretty seriously, and I only think I know one person who's ever gotten a hole-in-one in golf. So I guess my point, or if you want to make it into a question, is basically how much are we going to lose by taking that away from the sport or changing it to be more like golf?
Well, we are talking about only changing for the top tier. Sure. So for the amateurs, they'll still be able to bounce it off trees and have it go in.
Right.
So
So we're changing that rule too? If it goes off a tree and in, it doesn't count?
now, for Sarah, it counts.
Because she has smaller hands.
Grandfather.
Because
They're not
she's
smaller
grandmother.
hands, they're
Grandmother.
not as strong.
The
You're
musculature.
right. Pay
Musculature.
attention.
I guess
So-
to clarify, kind of my point is like, the top tier of disc golf and of any sport kind of drives the rest of that sport, right? So eventually, I'm assuming that everything else would move toward whatever is decided. So I guess that's kind of more of
interesting.
the point. It's
Okay.
like whatever people see, that's what, it's kind of the similar conversation of like, if you make a disc that's not PDGA approved, is anybody going to buy it?
Okay.
If you can do it, and companies have done it, but if no one who people are watching play is going to use that, the people want it. Be like Mike,
That's a really interesting point. What your point, and I'd like to get a quick take on from you guys and gals. If the baskets did change to a smaller size, would they trickle down so that in 25 years all baskets would be smaller? Are we actually talking about a
Yes.
change?
I would
So-
think so.
Yes.
Is that
I
a
think that
universe,
would be
Jessica?
the
Is that a universe?
So all of the baskets that are out there now are just gonna go to waste?
Oh,
We go to kids'
I've,
courses.
You can
I've
make-
spent like $1,000 or something
Kids'
just
course.
on my practice baskets at home.
Only
So
one
now
thing
am
to go with.
I gonna have to go buy a
So,
new basket to
but
practice
it's-
putting on?
You're thinking
No, what-
immediate impact.
Yeah, what we're
You're
talking
not
about
thinking
is
long-term impact. Like we're thinking that
20,
you would-
30 years down the road.
Yeah, you would, when you come to a pro tour or a national tour or an event that would be having these smaller baskets, you have plenty of time to practice. You would probably be able to find one via the pro tour being a
Well, yeah,
professional, but
Getting to the level that we're at, we've put in so much practice already on the baskets that we play on now.
I don't think that it's going to be as. Now, we're not even talking about the concept, so I
Right.
do feel you. Like you are completely right. I just think that the trickle down would happen and those baskets would move out.
Okay.
But we would.
It's the progression of it.
But it's a progression of the game, and we would all adjust and be able to have it.
I remember I had a.
You'll be in grandmasters by then.
Sorry.
Don't worry.
No. We're already seeing it happen right now with older targets being replaced by newer targets.
Yes.
Right.
It's just like any playground equipment, it's going to become obsolete and move out.
I had some sweet Deion Sanders Nikes with the air bubbles on them, and I spent like $300 on those shoes. And like Deion Sanders retired, and all of a sudden like he wasn't that cool anymore. So like I had to get I had to
Still cool.
get, they are cool.
It's always going to be cool.
Good
Now we're
point.
off
I'm just saying.
Thank you, Jeremy.
I just wish that Deion Sanders was at
So
football again.
we're gonna go to another Steve over here, and then
That's to you, Dion.
we'll go to Richard and Garrett, and we'll close it out. Okay.
There's too many Steves. I think we have to
Yeah.
have a Highlander.
We'll do one hallway.
Right. So there's a lot of really good conversation going on here, and I think the baskets conversation is a great conversation. And I really actually think that there was another part of the conversation that is a better part of that conversation, which is about the difficulty of the courses versus the baskets. And I want to address the baskets first because I know that's what we're talking about. When Paul, I'm going to point you out, when you throw an ace, it ends up on Sports Center. Even though you're in an MVP sells more discs pretty much immediately because people are like, wow, that was really cool. I want to learn to do that too. Everybody here remembers that moment. You went out and you threw, and you only threw like 20 feet. And there was that guy who threw, 400 feet, and you're like, I got to learn how to do that. Like that moment is what grows our sport almost every single time. And we can do that with, bigger, smaller baskets. It doesn't matter. But taking away the ability to have those Sports Center moments from us right now, talking the 5, 10, 15-year future, I think is a little bit more detrimental to the sport than if we were to make courses that are designed for you as the players. Because most of the courses we play on now weren't designed for the skill level and the technology that we have. When discs are getting further, players are throwing further, all of that's going on in a longer space than we've ever done. And right now, the way that we're solving that is just like making things longer. We're doing the ball golf route where we're trying to play on much longer courses. I think that the fan perspective is significantly more important because most of us are here because someone can afford to pay for it, and we can only afford to pay for it when Sports Center likes us and shows us to the rest of the world, or exposes us to 1,000 new people who may have never heard of us, or they see the local park and they go and they watch a tournament and they're like, that was so cool that guy hit an 80-foot jump putt. Like, they are aware that they can't do it. Where the basket is big or small, the boring comment is dead on. We just filmed AM1 from the MVP Open. And it is one of the most painful things to watch in some places because there's just some not great putts, right? How many people have ever watched like AM1 YouTube video and seen that it gets like 175 views or 1,000 views, right? But you guys, someone throws an ace and it's 50,000 views almost immediately, right? Somebody has an amazing round and it's 80,000 views. Jomez is, chomping at the bit to like have one of you guys throw a toboggan round because that's going to get watched over and over and over and over.
So,
and I think that smaller baskets would hurt us in the 5 and 10-year run because we would take a big step back really quickly from that kind of Sports Center activity, and the sport would have a really hard time catching up because I think we're doing a really good job growing the sport with our courses, but I think every one of us would take a giant paycheck hit if disc golf got like much more difficult where we have to lay up, 30, 40 footers because we're like, well, if I run this 30, 40 footer, 70% of the field's going to miss it. 30% of the top best pros might hit this.
So to synopsize what Steve said, do we want to lose the Sports Center moment to gain more golfiness in the sport?
And my point is fans gain more people joining the sport.
The Sports Center moment. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Paul.
Yeah,
Okay.
so flip side that, I was in the airport talking to somebody who didn't know anything about disc golf. He had only seen it on ESPN a few times. And he said, it must be pretty easy. I see aces on ESPN all the time, and that's all that I see.
But he did see it.
Right, but, so with a smaller target, we're still going to be acing. Would that be more impressive? Would that get more views?
But he would know that it was more impressive. He would just see an ace. He would just be like, cool, it went in.
You're thinking.
Well, you're
All right, wait. Go on, Aaron. Sorry.
Go ahead,
Did you
Paul.
want to finish your point?
Yeah, so
Okay.
just to finish my point, when I threw in the circle 3, I remember talking to the guy who was talking to ESPN, and he said, we're getting too much stuff. This isn't going to make it. And I got lucky and I made it on, but it's already getting to that point where too many times we're getting on there and they're being like, oh, is this?
It's the same thing. But is that a course design problem or a basket problem? We have too many courses where just the big hyzer shot is there.
No, I'm saying that there's all kinds of different shots going in,
Some people are bouncing thumbers.
I mean,
Right.
the easy factor, the easier something is, the more likely someone's going to be to try it.
Right.
I mean, that's great for growing the base.
So again, and that comes back to the very first question I think Sarah put forward, which is the goal of this spectators or is the goal of this the game? Which is more important, making the game golf or making the game fun to watch so that more people know about it?
Or maybe both. It's possible we could achieve both.
That's
So one great thing that we had was Macbeth's round where we shot 18 down.
right.
And the one thing that I got out of that was he was on there not just throwing aces. He was throwing gap shots. And the commentator did a great job of explaining to people how difficult it was.
Yeah.
And he had never done it before, but because that's what he did for a living, he made it super, super interesting.
Yeah.
And so I think that,
So let's jump to Eric.
Your conversation about the fact that when somebody aces, it's on ESPN, you sell. I get that, but that shouldn't be our focus avenue. That shouldn't be. When you talk about course design, I think everybody in this room is all ready and all on board for we need courses that are more challenging. So that's a like everybody agrees that. Nobody's like, nah, make them easier. That doesn't happen. We want them to be difficult. So the conversation of more aces means we sell more discs, we get more fans. I don't totally agree with that because I think the impact that our fans are having with us as professionals is driving the future of the sport. We're creating more players who are going to pass it on to their kids. We're creating that with our interactions, being able to watch us, being able to see us via the YouTube avenues a lot more. It's not because of somebody ace.
So
It's not because of that. I think it's more because of what we're doing, what Steve Dodge is doing with the Pro Tour, getting us more exposure and us doing what we're doing as professionals by being in the public eye, by interacting with people. That's the more important aspects of our sport, not aces.
So I think both sides of that have been represented well. Do you have something new?
Just to kind of reflect on that, just to be short.
Okay.
One of the things you talk about exposing. So my job is to bring new people into the sport, right? Because that's where we can grow the sport. And most of the time, the number one thing I get is what are the best rounds I should watch. We all remember we became a new disc golfer, and probably all of you were new disc golfers before you could just devour a bunch of stuff on YouTube. But that's 90% of the sport right now.
The best round you can watch had no aces.
Right, but I'm just saying is that the first thing I get is what's the best rounds I can watch? What are the rounds that I should focus on and drill into, and what should I watch? And it's not a bunch of people who laid up. It's not a bunch of people who it's not what we would consider a boring round.
You're over exaggerating the marksman basket, I think. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to call it a spade. But you're saying he said it was boring. You think it's going to be boring. 2/3 the size is what Steve mentioned before. I don't think that's going to be that.
I'm not talking about
smaller.
I'm not talking about the marksman. I'm saying I literally just filmed an AM1 card, and it's one of the most boring rounds of golf ever.
We're apples and oranges, and you make it quick. I'm ready to move on.
Sure. Really quick.
I want to keep it under 2 hours because
So-
people tune out.
Okay. So one thing that I think is important is everybody's getting excited about the aces and things like that. But back to the point of Macbeth's round, that was super interesting because it was a moment in disc golf. And that can be drawn in. So what I'm saying is pressure moments at the end of tournaments could possibly be with smaller targets, possibly be maybe on ESPN for a winning putt or something like that. It'll be more dramatic for sure. So that's a point.
If we tell the story correctly.
Yes.
If we tell the story.
And to Steve's point, it'll be more difficult to tell that story. So
He believes. That's personal opinion.
It's-
I don't think I think that if it's done correctly, it'll be done. Because he
Correct.
has great points, and I'm
Yes,
not trying.
100%.
They're also
100%.
some-
So we're going to go to
my
Richard.
opinions are also my own.
Dixon, do you actually have a good point, Dixon? Do you want to? Oh, on this topic? Oh, I apologize, Richard. Last point on this topic.
So with all of the ESPN stuff, what you win them with is what you win them to, right? So if they see an ace and they go out to the course and they don't throw aces, they say this is bullcrap, right? I can't do that. Why am I doing this? I think Paul's round was the most significant media in disc golf history. But number one, it was probably longer than all of the rest of the clips combined, and it was solid shot, solid shot, solid shot. And that's, I think, the more exciting thing. But the reality is we keep talking about ESPN. since Dawson's first ace, I mean, how many times has it really been? 15? 20, maybe?
Yeah.
I mean,
He's a missed shot.
We can't base our marketing and our growth on 20 random acts that somehow ended up on ESPN. I mean, that can't be our measure of growth. But the ace, going back to what you were saying earlier, right? My brother's been playing ball golf for 30-something years. He's got one ace. And he asked me one day, how many aces do you have? And I said, I don't know, 50 or something. There's guys that have, 200. It's a joke. Right? Like 200 aces, wow. Really tough.
So it's a different game.
It's a different
So-
game, but I'm saying like the ace can't be our look what we can do because it's not valuable in the long term. It's all sizzle in those days.
And on more difficult courses, we are going to see
You would have aces
significantly less aces.
Right.
Like there's
But
a few holes you can actually do it out here.
this argument is simply boiling down to: are we trying to play golf, or are we trying to make the spectators go wow?
Yeah.
For a sizzle, maybe. All right.
So there are two
Richard.
things, because when you're discussing actually the different baskets, your arguments are typically that you want to have a new type of obstacle, harder obstacle in the game. But if you're thinking about obstacles, every hole actually is different obstacle. So there's actually no reason to have all 18 baskets different size. You can have both. You can have both aces, and you can have both more difficult putts at the end. You just have two types of baskets, and you may combine them on a course. It's really easy. So the question is whether you would consider it as a different obstacle to have a different size basket.
Easier hole having a smaller target, harder hole having a normal size target.
So you may adjust it. That's definitely one option. So whether this is viable, there's one question. The second one was there was the discussion about those different sizes in other sports. There were some adjustments in basketball. I know many sports which adjusted the sizes of the balls. Even soccer adjusted the size of the goalpost. And the reason was never about players. Players had nothing to do with it. It was about spectators. Because what soccer is facing, and every other sport is facing, is a competition between different sports. So the changes and adjustments in the rules are almost always done from the competition for the audience, for the spectators, so on. So I think if disc golf wants to change their rules, they should do it only based on the necessity out of the pressure from the competition for the space, not for the audience. The inside of the game is not that important, actually. It's really strange, especially talking to you guys. But it's not that. That's not important. It's not important how difficult it is for you to talk.
Did they make
It's
the soccer
about-
goal bigger?
Yeah, soccer goal, but bigger. Absolutely, because
So
it
because
was
it's boring to not
It was
get
so
goals.
boring.
Hockey,
But
hockey had the same.
it was not for players. The players are not bored.
Pads got
It was for
smaller
the
and stuff like that.
spectators, and there were different changes in the different sports with the rules. So that happens. And also, if you're thinking about the precision sports, if you're thinking about shooting, biathlon, or all the other sports, darts, actually the perfection happens very often. It's not about executing 18 under,
But
18 under every time.
in darts and stuff like that, same distance,
Oh, yeah,
same
yeah.
target,
No,
no factors.
Of course,
Disc golf is very
you're
different.
completely right. But that's why I mentioned
Sure.
things like biathlon or like trap shooting.
Yeah.
Which things are slightly different. Okay, still the same distance about, but still the perfection happens quite often. It's not; these are not like the biggest spectator sports in the U.S. But in Europe, these are pretty good sports in a sense. So I think actually, really, this point of view of spectators and competition with the other sports should be important.
I think,
Yeah.
Steve made a mention of something that I think could help with that. And say a smaller target is what we're doing. And it's telling the story. Having good commentators, having knowledgeable people tell the listeners, whether it's a quick video or it's a YouTube video that with commentary or it's live commentary or it goes to another broadcast, wherever it is, or it's an article. It needs to be told correctly to shape why it was difficult, what was so special, what made it something that, wow, that's why I'm watching this video, why I'm intrigued by it, because we tell the story the right way. And that's what will get more people involved, I think, because then he threw a 180-foot approach from an awkward footing, and we have to write that correctly so people don't understand how difficult it is to throw from an awkward footing. Nobody gets that, and we have to be able to try and express that in the right way.
Charlie has a quick comment on this topic.
For everyone's here, the smaller one. Anyone can think of any example in modern sports history where making the sport harder has increased spectator.
Baseball, basketball.
Surfing. No, basketball is way you can't help it. Steph Curry can drop 30 much easier than Michael Jordan throwing 90s. So my question is, can anyone name any sport where making it harder increases viewership?
Baseball.
No, it's not fair to
The
do it
90s
with
home run boom was the best time baseball ever had. Still, that was the most action. Scoring is what everybody wants to see.
basketball and football. It's all because of injury. That has nothing to do with.
You don't think like hand checking in basketball had any effect on scoring?
No, I'm saying the reason they're changing the rules is because of health and injury.
Right, and increased scoring led to increased viewership.
Do you think the game of golf has gotten more difficult? I think so.
They try to make the cups bigger.
They did.
Yeah,
They're making the courses harder and longer.
So, but
They're challenging the players by course design.
But the fact that that was even a question for them.
Golf is dying because it's too expensive.
I think to Charlie's point, I think that whether we want to name individual sports, to Charlie's point, the concept of making sports easier makes them more approachable and makes more people play.
Nobody ever tried
So that's
Our sister sport golf.
And it might just honestly make people want to give up.
They didn't
You
make
never
the
know.
cup smaller.
They
Greens are tougher.
greens are
So-
We're
tougher.
not faster.
Courses are
Right, more action. But that's what I mean, more action. And I think that's what Sarah was talking about. A smaller basket leads to less action.
That's
More layups.
But that hasn't been.
More
drama.
drama?
Well,
Yeah.
again, it's a different story.
Right.
It's a different story.
I don't
And the
know if
que-
we've proven that a smaller target does lead to more laying up.
True.
We haven't done it. We haven't seen what it
Right.
looks like.
Right.
That's a hard like statement of fact.
Right.
It's not. It's an
sure.
opinion where if we were to try these baskets and give them a test, then that would be really fun to see what it really means. Are we laying up as much, or are we running more?
Let's let
Do we know it's
Sarah.
gonna catch?
Let's let Sarah finish up this topic, and then we'll jump to Garrett
I'm
for the
not
last
convinced
question.
that the spectators are going to understand how difficult it would be to put on those smaller baskets without actually ever doing it.
Right.
Yes.
Like people see our sport and they think, oh, you just throw it in there. And then when you get them in a tournament, they, went sideways, oops. Like
In a
people
pressure
don't-
situation.
Right, they don't really understand already how difficult it can be. So I don't think that they'll really understand the smaller basket concept, and they'll really just make us look bad.
Well,
So
I'd like to add something to
Go
that if I
ahead.
can. Honestly, if they just see people missing on the baskets, what is it going to make you want to do? Practice on this basket that you can't come to find?
We don't know if they are going to be the same.
With
Well-
time, people will understand what's
Right.
going on after they play. Obviously.
Your mind's in the right place, but we don't know. We
The
don't
peop-
know if people are
The
going to be
people
the
who
same.
might think that it's becoming a harder sport might think, oh, well, I want to be able to practice on this type of basket. Like, where do I find this basket to try it?
So
Yeah.
To find out
There'll be
So
an
the-
if it's easier or harder, or
the
how
place-
much harder it is.
the place where Eric's going is, hey, maybe if we design a basket, maybe if we hold some exhibition events, maybe we can actually see.
Yeah.
That's where Eric's going with that, and that's a valid thought because we haven't actually done.
The PDGA has done some of that though.
Oh,
The
they
game
win-
development team has taken
You
statistics
mentioned
on
that they
the
win,
bullseyes.
but they win
Yeah.
bullseyes.
They use, I don't know exactly what, we have to talk to Chuck
So,
Kennedy, he's
for
the chair of that
So
committee. But he has data and they've done a lot of discussion and talking about the viability of a small basket.
What
a good next step.
What about us as players finding out what we want? Not a committee of people who play how many tournaments a year. We play all the time. Why don't we?
The data that they collected is from all over the country, from tournaments all over the place. It's not just these people, this little boys club getting together and playing a tournament. That's not how it is.
That data is a valid starting point, and if they didn't do it on a basket that we would all agree we should have, then we could do another test.
I like 2/3 the size across the board.
But
like you
let's
mentioned before.
let's move on to the final question, and then we'll get ready to wrap this up, and we'll do it in under 2 hours. All right, go ahead, Garrett.
I guess my question is to like the elite pros, like if it were to change to the elite pros, would it be any advantages for anybody?
Oh, would any player have any
Do you think
particular
any player
advantage?
would have any better advantages?
With better putters, with
I'm gonna
more
guess-
advantage.
What about the better drivers
shots.
that are on tour, or the better statistics they have?
How about the better approach throwers?
Exactly.
I feel
prefer
like
not to
I
even
play a
putt,
lot of
really.
tournaments and I don't putt the greatest, but I'm still able to compete at the top. So I feel like if I can beat out those competitors now, I don't think those players would stand as much of a chance as they would with a bigger basket with me. I'm just saying that's me personally, and I think Kevin is a longer thrower. I think AB. I think it would make it easier for Eagle. I think it would make it easier for all the big arm players, honestly.
Because their approach shots would be shorter.
Shorter.
Well, and we did that at the tournament Durham mentioned earlier. It was on a golf course.
I've never played the smaller targets or anything before. I've seen Cam Todd's basket in North Carolina. You brought it out one day. But I do not like the concept of a smaller basket. I mean, I'm not voicing for everybody, but I feel like it would still make an advantage for me over other people.
Well, how,
I mean,
Well, that's what I was just gonna say, because we
I don't
play
think it
on
should be
golf
an
course
advantage
and
for
it's the
anybody.
same.
I think it should just stay the same the
Well,
way it originally.
Using that logic, if we had a small basket or a large basket or a bigger basket, somewhere someone's going to get an advantage. So the question is, what should the game be? That's the
do you
question.
think it'd be more interesting to watch?
Okay.
Now, I'd be a lot more people seeing me do what I do. Lay up an eagle from 25 feet, not lay up a miss, you know. All right. Garrett threw it 700 feet, but he missed a 25-foot eagle.
You have the birdie.
Yeah, I got the same thing that ball threw 400, 300. You got a birdie.
So where you're going, I think brings in the whole concept that has been a undertone is the course design should be better.
It should be course design.
It should be.
I don't think it's anything.
And I think that we can gather that as a, like, all right, cool, that's the best start. That's the best start. Best start, and then basket talk after, maybe a year from now, after we've seen more data, because the courses have gotten better, we can be in that discussion of, all right, yeah, people are still shredding, and these courses have gotten more difficult because we've adjusted to no more tweener holes. We've adjusted to making on par fours players having to throw two exceptional shots to receive.
I think we should try to make it a goal towards after we get disc golf in the Olympics to start to manage that. Because if we're trying to make it an Olympic sport, you got to have a certain amount of Olympic countries to do so.
Well, then we need to cut things out as far as standards of professionalism, as far as all the things that we do on and off the course.
Baskets that are already made, ready for courses to go in, that all these other companies have built for.
Yeah.
So we just stop making these baskets that they have in warehouses and put them out of business, or maybe Cam Todd steps in and takes over the business. You know, that's one basket provider. You know, it's kind of an ouch in a lot of ways, but
yeah.
The first thing, to Garrett, to that point, the first thing is to determine what the ideal is. The second thing,
26 years.
the second thing is to figure out if there are logistics to be able to help to make it happen. So, thank you very much. Let's let Paul say this last thing, and then we'll wrap her up.
This is my last thing. I think my main point for this whole thing is if the basket gets smaller but catches better, then I'm all for it. But if it doesn't catch as good as the ones that we have, then
So I really liked some of the points that Richard brought up about there's other ways to do this, and even I think he mentioned having some small baskets, some big baskets, and that blew my mind. But wow, is it a valid point? Baskets don't, on the course, they don't always have. If you have a 150-foot hole,
I will
Well,
say
that's
that
like changing the height,
we-
putting it on a
how
hill
many
and putting it on a
tournaments
large
have
pool.
we played that are at a B or C tier quality that we play on multiple different baskets?
Of course, yeah.
And that is something that no player here enjoys.
I
It's
don't care
not.
about
It's not good.
it. Seriously, I
All
don't
right.
care. It doesn't bother me.
Okay.
But the standard of our events have been it's 18 of the same bag,
So I
and
think
that's what you're supposed to be playing.
we will.
So I don't agree with that. That's my opinion.
But the point was different, just to make it a different offset.
I understand.
Just to make one or two really difficult putts.
I like what Sarah said as we put more obstacles on the green.
Yeah.
Bushes, trees, different things like that. That if you have to land it to the left side you have to have the open look. If you land on the right side, you're dead. No putt.
Yeah,
So
no putt.
we're gonna close this out with from me.
Ooh.
Hey, we're gonna close this out with Paul McBeth,
Mr. 18 down.
who is the only, I'm gonna say the only 1050 rated questioner here, because he successfully split people who thought they agreed.
1048.
So now, good luck to me, Paul. Go ahead.
So kind of on a financial standpoint, because everyone wants these courses harder, would it be financially smarter to get a set of pro tour baskets for pro tour events, or for most courses to invest into their course
courses.
If we made smaller baskets, or is
Yeah,
it?
if there was a Pro Tour standard basket, Pro Tour took around the country.
I
should be smarter than that, or have these.
if we were gonna map this out, the first year would be exhibition events, and we would take probably 20 baskets around, 18 foot a course, and then 2 practice baskets.
How are you gonna
the
do that
ne-
when we play on different courses?
What's that?
How are you gonna do that when we play on different courses?
These
A lot
would
of
just
the
be
times-
for exhibition events.
Okay.
This is just
to collect data.
Yeah, just to
see,
collect data.
Test.
And over the course of, let's say, pretend we have 12 events, I would say 10 of them would be men and 2 of them would be women. And we would just test it out and see what happens. Or actually, maybe a little more balanced than that. If that goes well, you do it again the next year, and maybe you hold a legitimate tournament on them. And if that goes well and people start to understand the baskets, and if not, an upshot becomes exciting, and these are all a lot of presumptions, then the Pro Tour would be the ones that carry that around. This presumes, number 1, that the exhibitions go well, number 2, the tournament goes well, number 3, the PBJ's on board, and then number 4, we all decide, hey, let's jump in this pool and swim.
The other
So there's a lot of ifs.
The other issue there is with companies having their names on baskets, that you yourself, the Pro Tour, probably would lose money having your own basket.
I don't want a basket.
I know. If you were to design the basket and it'd be under the Pro Tour,
I don't want that.
but we wouldn't be playing on an Innova modified basket. We wouldn't be playing on a dynamic modified basket or a DGA or something like that, because it would be the standard. It would be the standard, or they would all have to be the same, and it could be made by all the manufacturers, but it has to be that exact thing we're talking about.
But that you can easily put an advertising sponsor on
True.
fans or
So,
whatever.
Yeah, pay for this. They pay for the time, the promotion.
Eric, you brought up the point at the very beginning about standardization. And if one basket was developed by, let's say, all of disc golf, and then we decided this is our standard basket, and it was designed by Discraft, Innova, Prodigy, Dynamic Disc,
All look
MVP.
the same.
Everybody worked together and did it. I'm literally brainstorming right here. But then let's pretend we do that, and then Nike comes in. They have to pay all of these companies a royalty to make our basket.
Good point.
That's not bad.
No, everybody wins.
Just a random thought that
Do you foresee all these companies actually working together to one basket?
all of these companies are working together to make the Pro Tour happen.
If
So-
they want to have a basket that's used on the most viewed videos,
so
they'll get on board. They'll have to. They'll
I'm-
have to make money, because you don't have that advertisement. That's a lot of money lost.
Seems
We're-
like a minor detail.
We're getting ready to sign off. Does anybody want to say goodbye to their mom or dad or loved ones or friends and family? All right. Thank you all very much. You guys have a great night.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
I'm Steve Dodge. This has been Pro Tour Talk. Have a good night.
Yeah.